We're going to be launching into what I've never said, which is a series, right? But it's because it's what we're looking at in Scripture, that we're actually talking about, and it came up, this idea of the day of judgment. And so I was thinking about it, and I really liked that song when it came up because it was so appropriate. Because what I said, and I'll launch into it with this, that for those of us who hate the idea of judgment, the people who never hate the idea of a just judgment are those people who are oppressed, those people who are under the boot of evil, who are being hurt and slain by people who treat them as a profit center. And so those of us in the Western world, and I would like you to consider why the idea of judgment strikes us sometimes with such a discord. We don't like it. Because I know for me, as I look at it, sometimes I feel as if maybe I'm complicit. Maybe I kind of like the things I have going on. I don't want to be judged, even though I know they're not correct. But I want to get into this. Now here is the actual meat of the message as we get into judgment. It's interesting when I speak to people, and it's funny because you guys are fairly lucky in this regard. That when you, what's the first question anybody, and you men, I've never been a woman, no comments. We're splitting hairs, my brother would say. But when you go to a group you've never met, you're at a party, you get drugged to a party, you're somewhere, and you meet somebody, the first one is, hey, my name is, and then what's the very first question guys get? What do you do for a living? I'm like, right? Because when I go, I'm a professional speaker, I don't know, right? I'm a pastor. It's like I'm always met with two kinds of things. It's suddenly I'm met with, I'm a harbinger of guilt from their grandmother or something. Oh, I would go to church, but I'm just saying. But the other one is, it's surprising how many people, out of the blue, tell me something as amazingly intimate and personal as this. And this is crazy. They'll say, oh, well, I don't believe in God. Think about what that's how okay. So one of the things I read was a gentleman who is the chaplain at some large university, and he was getting that a lot. So he would ask them, says, oh, what God do you not believe in? And I've never really said that, but I've had conversations with people about what they don't believe in. And it's very interesting because what I come to discover is the same thing this chaplain comes to discover is, I don't believe in the God they don't believe in either. That I actually don't believe in an angry, vengeful, joyless, bearded old man in the sky looking through the peephole of your life to make sure nobody down there is having fun, or one day you're going to pay for that mess. Right? That's not what I believe. A God who only brings judgment and criticism, and he's critical and judgmental if you enjoy the stuff. No, that's not the God I believe in. I hear people describe God in these terms. And here's what happens, and this is kind of a philosophical thing, but I won't say her name, but it's her fault because her husband she said I was smart. You know who you are. You can move around, but you're back there. Yeah, there you are waving. And so now that I feel smart, I'm going to start sounding a lot smarter, right? Because it's good. It's validation. But I want to tell you, this is what I've discovered about a lot of people. A lot of people, they hear these things. They hear how God is described a lot by many of us within the church even. Let's just be very honest. The way we talk about God growing up. And they decide they cannot believe in that God. And so what do they label themselves? Atheists. They'll say, well, I guess I'm an atheist. Or the other thing they'll do is they think of judgment. And I want to say a lot of us fit into this one. They think of judgment, and they think of heaven as a place out there, and they think of it as ethereal and not physical, and so they go, that doesn't sound good. And then they hear people talk about hell, and they think of hell as a place where, if heaven is up there, let's all just say, so where is heaven then? Down there. And they think of heaven up there far away, but it's just weird, and I don't like any part of that. And they think of hell, and they think of things like this fiery place filled with worms and snakes and torture. And so they go, well, I can't believe in that either. And so what they've decided is, not only are some people atheists, because they can't believe in that God we've presented, but they also say, I don't believe in a day of judgment. I don't believe in judgment at all, because I can't believe in that. And this is what's interesting. I'm convinced that these people, and I put this on your Nada bulletin, these people, well, they're not actually dismissing God and his just judgment, nor are they dismissing God himself? You know what they've dismissed is simply some very outlandish and ridiculous caricatures with some really lifelong consequences. So much so that they meet somebody like me and they simply say, well, I don't believe in God. That's a pretty big statement to make. And I would say, if you're going to make that statement, if you're going to say I don't believe in judgment, at least let us tell you what the real story is. Because to dismiss these things offhand, well, it's a fool's errand. But I think it's even true for those of us within the church. When I said last week that I was going to speak upon judgment, it's an issue that strikes a lot of us as, ugh. Now, I've realized some of you old people, you get far too excited when I talk about judgment, right? Get them. I'm not here to get them. And I would prefer you stop saying get them to people who actually come in here thinking that God loves them, right? Have made the mistake that Jesus came, as he said, and we take him at his word, not to condemn at all, but to save. So I would appreciate if that's you today, or if you have dismissed God based upon these caricatures, you've dismissed judgment based upon these caricatures, then I would hope that you were able just to make a small spot today and just listen to what I have to say, that Scripture has to say, that Jesus has to say. And so we're going to look at what Jesus has to say about judgment. We talked about last week, and if you weren't here, I had a couple people even reach out and say, man, I caught this online, and it was really good, and it wasn't necessarily anything I said that I'm interpreting for you. I just talked about how the early church decided what we were going to have in our Scripture. And do you guys remember what the measuring stick is? It's a one-word answer. The measuring stick, Jesus, thank you. Oh, good. That was going to be bad. My little cow valve fluttered, right? Jesus is the... Huh? Who said moo? Because PTSD. Yeah. Bob! I told you guys the worst thing about having a cow valve put in my heart was making eye contact with the cow as they wheeled him to the bed next to me. That was... So we're going to make Jesus and his words, you got to admit, that was funny. Were you listening, Lantroot? That was funny. So what we're going to do, while there's many, many things that other people have to say about the day of judgment, that Paul talks about stuff, and I'm not dismissing any of that, but I think we all need to agree for time's sake and for clarity, if we're going to fall back to one person's words, let's fall back to the words of Christ, okay? And so we're going to look at, my wife, when I gave her the stuff for the Nada Bulletin that she puts together, and it said Matthew 24 and 25, she goes, but what verses? It's like, most all of them. We're going to skip a little bit of the first part of 24 for time's sake, but we're going to hop into it. But I do want to say that one thing you need to understand is this, and we're not going to do it all to this week. There you go. You can breathe easy. We're going to go ahead and hop in. When I get to 10:15, which is our cutoff time, right? We will just stop, and I'll release you guys, and we'll go into next week. But I need you to understand something that really, if you're not going to understand this, it's going to really leave gaps in your understanding of what I'm trying to give you today, which is Jesus was Jewish, right? And I don't say that. It's become almost a flippant, stereotypical thing for pastors to say, because this idea of the historicity and the contextual truth of Christ is becoming such a big deal that people have gotten too close to it, make it flippant. Not trying to be flippant. I'm saying for LifePoint, we need to understand that not only was Jesus Jewish, but that his audience was Jewish. And there's many things about resurrection, about the day of judgment, that were deeply rooted in the Jewish scripture. So when Jesus is speaking to them, he's speaking as a Jewish man, using Jewish language about a Jewish event that they were absolutely aware of, which is judgment and resurrection and some of these things. So let's hop right into it, and we're going to skip, for those of you who got nervous, we're going to skip 35 verses in Matthew 24, and here we go, and I'm just going to turn my back, and here we are. Let's read them. Jesus is speaking. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, not even Jesus. I saw a sign. I shouldn't say that because you guys are going to follow it, but it's about funny signs. Some of the signs are dirty, and I apologize if you go hop on there, so don't. But one of the signs was posted. It's all weathered, and it was a true sign from 1990-something. It says, Jesus, are you prepared for the rapture? Christ is returning on October 28th, 1992. But it wasn't a joke. You guys do realize that throughout history, people have claimed that he's coming back, right? In fact, I would probably surprise you if I spoke about how some absolute denominations and faiths have come about because of the advent of Christ, the second advent. Anyway, here we go. But about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor Jesus, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking. So, okay, I got to say this. For those of you who go, surely you don't believe about the flood. Why do you believe about the flood or Jonah? Because Christ quoted it, right? If I'm going to believe the resurrection, then I have to believe Christ when he quoted this other stuff. Before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. They were just living their lives before the flood, up to the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Now, this is going to be terrifying, and I'm going to tell you, if you need to embrace the urgency of it, do that. But I don't want you to embrace, this is just me, and I'm going to tell you why. This is Don talking. I don't want you to be terrified about this stuff because I lived my life terrified of this stuff. So much so that every Sunday my dad would, and he even talked about it this week in text to me, right? He used to put that stupid song on to terrify me. The last Sunday, right? The last Sunday. Remember that, Joe? Huh? It's horrible. Two men working in a field. He turns around, his friend is gone. It was horrible. It was horrible. It was true, right? A man and a woman in their bed. He turns around, she's gone. Horrible. Now, there is, I want you though to not downplay the urgency. Does that make sense? Here we go. Because can we agree nobody's been terrified into a relationship with anyone lovingly? Here we go. Two men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. Two women will be grinding with a hand mill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore, keep watch because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Is that it, Joseph? Okay. So what are we saying here, right? What are we getting into? I want you to move past really some very terrifying allegory, metaphor, or truth. I'm not for sure, but I want to give you the point of what he's saying. No one knows the hour of his return. Can we agree that's basic there? That no one knows when Christ is going to return. And so very basically, as we hop into this thing, sometimes people try to dig into huge theology to make sure you guys leave thinking, I'm smart. Well, this is not going to do it. No one knows when he's coming back, so live your life prepared for that day. That's the beginning of his message here. Live your life prepared for that day. But then he says, it wouldn't be fair, I think, that if he were to tell us all to be prepared for his judgment and then not tell us what we're going to be judged upon. Does that make sense? It wouldn't be very fair for him to say, well, if he's coming back, you might be gone, right? I don't know. Or left. And then not say what the criterion is. What is it? What are we going to be judged upon? Let's keep moving along. Josie, 45 through 51. Or if it's Spencer, who's doing it? Spencer?
It's kind of a fun joke for me, though. Just keep looking at her.
Well, the difference is you can grow slightly better facial hair, but she's much stronger with the Olympic lifts. Here we go. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, this is the stuff that makes some of you go, I don't want to listen to this, I want to put it far, far away, and other people hop on that train and they run with the last sentence. But again, I want you to get away from some of the emotions and let's just dig into using our mind on what he's actually saying. And obviously, that final statement gets us, and I'm not going to downplay it. But I also today want to highlight what Jesus himself said we will be judged upon. And the first thing he says that you will be judged upon, he said that if a master gives a servant a duty, it's going to be good to find that guy doing what he told him to do. Is that not basic what he said? Don't be the one who says, he's never coming back. The Lord is not slow in coming, Peter said, but he is patient because he wishes all to have salvation, none to perish. But Jesus says this, and this is going to be this week and next week. We're going to be 4 things. I'm going to give you 4 things that I got from this. Jesus said, you will be judged upon what you did with your calling. You're going to be judged upon what you did with your calling. So put aside all this absolute fear that paralyzes you from being active and being efficient in your calling. You see, everyone in here has been given a calling. All of us have. Look at 45 and 46. Is that there, Spencer, again? Just the end? If not, okay. The master of that servant will come on a day when he's not expect him, and in an hour he is not aware. And that's not the one I wanted, I don't think, but that's okay. If I messed up, I messed up. That's on me because I was really excited with this stuff. When he says that it will be good for someone to be found doing what he has been called to do by the master, that's what he says. All of us have been given a charge. Maybe you don't think you have. Maybe you think, I don't think that. Every one of us have been given a responsibility. And I'm not even now talking, and I mean this, and I thought a lot about this. Now, there is, if I'm talking about Christians, which I am, but this is talking about everyone, is it not? Everyone has been given a calling, a responsibility. It's a relationship that only you can impact the way you can impact it. See, we don't understand that sometimes. We think that the waves, the winds of life have just kind of capriciously swept us here, and now we're just being blown that way. And everywhere you go, however, there are people and relationships that only you have been given charge over, the responsibility to impact. Do you understand that? Dads, nobody else can be your children's dad. In fact, for some of you who, a little theology here real quick, some of you guys get upset when God says, I'm a jealous God. So, and when you go, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I said, how about this? How about if one day my kids came home and said, I'm going to start calling Randy Voigt Dad. I want to go hang out with Randy Voigt, and I want to live with Randy Voigt. And I'm going, are you kidding me? You want to start talking about a jealous dad. I would be a very jealous father if my children began to look to other men and call them dad. I just gave you 3/4 of the Bible, people. So, you as a father, you as a mother, you as a coach, you as a teacher, you as an employer, but also siblings, friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, doctors, administrators, politicians, each one of us have been called to faithfully navigate roles that only we have been given. That's the first part of this. And you will be judged on how you live up, how you navigate the role, how you faithfully impart and impact the people that God has given charge of you. And then Jesus says that to treat that responsibility casually is to do so at your own peril. Is that not what he said? He said, to do so, you have 2 servants. One who is faithfully fulfilling their charge, and the other one who goes, you know what? The master's never coming back. There's really no big deal to this. I'll just do what I'm going to do. In fact, he says, I'm going to go ahead and neglect my duties. And he says, there will be judgment for people who do not faithfully navigate the charge you've been given. And I'm thinking that sounds fair. And I think it sounds fair to say, do not treat casually the role, do not treat casually the charge that you have been given, because I want to share something that's huge. God did not treat it casually when he assigned it to you. So to treat it casually is to scoff at God. But there's more. Look at 25, 1-9. See how quickly we move through the entire chapter? Here we go. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Here's what I would say. That's a little confusing because it's not 10 women who are going to marry the groom. It would basically be like a wedding party. Does that make sense to you guys? So consider a wedding party. When Michelle and I first got married, we're still married. In fact, we just had our 33-year anniversary on Friday. Hey. I assume that's for me because I'm a saint for putting up with that woman. And I said, don't ever say that, guys. And I told her, so our joke that many of you guys have the same joke is, how many years you been married? 7 good years, right? 96 was iffy. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins, the wedding party. When we first got married, people would have like 4 and maybe 5 bridesmaids, and then you have 4 or 5. Have you guys seen what they do nowadays sometimes? Nobody can say no. It'll be like 35 women here, 42 guys over there. Guys, it's just a strange thing for those of us old people. But there's 10 in this one. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. That's a big deal. The foolish ones, they took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, well, they took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. Do you guys see this theme? This theme is, don't treat casually. Don't act just because God is so loving that nothing will ever take place. I mean, as parents, right? We've always said, don't mistake our mercy for weakness. Don't mistake my grace for not caring. There'll come a day with anything that we're going to say you have to deal with this. In fact, I would say if you're someone who's unfamiliar, maybe too familiar, if you put all of this in the context of the relationships we have and begin philosophically to believe, not that God should live the relationship, should mirror our relationships, but what if it's the other way around? What if every relationship we've been given is an absolute mirror to the way that the relationship with Christ should be? That this is truth in this stuff. Let's look at it again. It says what? The bridegroom was, and they all became drowsy and they fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and they trimmed their lamps, which they're getting ready. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both of us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." Okay. Couple things about this, and I do want to tell you that none of what I'm telling you is going to exhaust everything that's in there. Can we just agree that that's not the expectation? That I can't go down every rabbit hole that is true. I'm trying to make some points about this, what you will be judged upon. So I will say this, then we'll look at it. Number 2 thing, you will be judged upon on the day of judgment, according to Jesus. You will be judged upon what you did with the knowledge of Jesus which you've been given. It's a pretty big deal. You'll be judged upon, I'm in the way, what you did with the knowledge of Christ you have been given. Number 1, he says, you're going to be judged with how you lived the responsibility, the charge of the relationships only you've been given. Number 2 is this, you will be judged with the knowledge of Jesus which you have been given. 10 bridesmaids, all given the same information, were they not? Were they all given the same opportunity? Every one of them were given the same. And I'm going to say this, and let's bring it in from the world and look at you guys, because honestly, you should expect a pastor to try to be truthful, shouldn't you? I mean, it's been interesting. One of the things I've discovered over the past couple months is there should be no ambiguity in what you expect from a believer, and specifically a pastor, and what you might give up or expect from somebody else. So I'm going to be truthful with you. Everyone in here today is receiving the exact same information. Not holding anything back. I don't care how old you are, how young you are, how new you are, what you came in with. I'm telling you the same information. I'm not trying to say to a believer, an unbeliever, an old believer, a young believer, anything different. I'm giving all of you the exact same information. Those of you in the health field understand how this works. You walk in, you see your doctor, we all receive the same information about diet, about exercise, right? All of us get the same information. When you go to a counselor about your relationships, about your spouse, about your husband, when you guys do premarital counseling, which I suggest you do, we're all given the exact same information. But what people don't equate that with is this. The same information gives you the same opportunity. Everyone in here is hearing the same thing. 10 bridesmaids, all given the exact same information. They have the same tools. They have the exact same opportunity as all of you did. And Jesus says that right now and going forward on forever, our choice, whatever we choose, whether we are wise with the information, what we do with it, or whether we are foolish with the information that everyone has been given, will determine the judgment. Sounds fair? We would never say with that information about our health, with that information about our relationships, I don't think anybody here would say, well, that's not fair. That's not fair. I mean, they told me, and they gave me all the information, and the doctor said I would have a heart attack. That's not fair. There's people I see walking around, I'm surprised they haven't died yet from a heart attack. They're sweating gravy. I'm just being honest. Their life choices have led them. There are people who are so emaciated, and even though, and I'm being honest here, even though they knew that the choices, the stuff they put in their body, this stuff was out there. Heck, the 80s, Nancy Reagan said, just say no, right? And today they're living the impact of that. And they can't say, and I'm not trying to be foolish here, there's tragedy involved in the outcome, but you can't say that it was surprising. We're all given the same information, and that information leads to opportunity. Everyone in here, Jesus says that our choice, whether we are wise or foolish with the information, will determine the judgment. But he continues with this wedding analogy. Man, I'm going to have to start talking more. I'm going to get you guys out on time. Look at this. Look at 25, 10 through 13. But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the foolish ones who had been given the same information, now it's time, and they got to go buy the oil. The bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. Lord, Lord, they said, and this is going to be harsh, but it's information which leads you to opportunity. And they said, open the door for us. But he replied, truly I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. I want to tell you there's so much more in there that I want to go through, and maybe on another day we will, but it was really pressed upon my heart today that I just want to talk about what we will be judged upon, not all the other nuances and things. So I want to say this about what's happening. I've done a lot of weddings in this town. I do a lot of weddings. I also, for those of you who pay my salary through your tithes, I want you to know some of the other things that come from it. I also, through the funeral home, anyone who does not have a pastor or cannot afford a pastor, I will do their weddings for them, and whether or not they pay me through their insurance or whatever is no concern because of what you guys do. I'll go with them to the place, to the funeral home. Mac and Liz Olson are awesome. I'll sit there if they need me to be there to help them work through the insurance, not because of no insurance, but because you know what they need is someone just to say it's going to be okay. Let's get through today. And I have done many funerals. I also do many, many weddings. I do weddings all the time, and I just told you how they've changed throughout the years, but some things that haven't changed are this. Whether it's 4 people or 10 people or 25 people next to them, I can say this. Here's how it works. I'm here, they're there, and let's say I always forget, the bride's here, I think, the groom is here, but it doesn't matter because on this side, there's like 5 or 6 guys all dressed the exact same as the groom for the most part, right? And I have a theory. Do you know why I think they're dressed the exact same? Because listen, that bride doesn't care at that point if he goes through with it or not. A wedding is taking place. Again, I don't think, Jacob, I don't know if you were not listening or not, but that was really funny. Right? He leaves, next one up. Didn't know, that's what you signed up for. Over here, though, I have the bridesmaids, and they don't look exactly the same, but I can tell you some things about them. They're standing right next to the bride, but they're not the bride. Now, they may be in the wedding party. In fact, they are. They're up front next to the bride. They may be dressed up in clothes they will never wear again. Bridesmaids. My wife and I, is Michelle in here? So she decided when we got married 33 years ago, she got the bridesmaids' dresses, and they had to be made. And looking back, I still think they're cute, and I think they're pretty, but I'm not so sure, Michelle and I think they were intended to be curtains or drapes, and not, yeah, right? I like them. But they were dressed, everybody's the same. So they're all dressed the same in clothes they'll never wear again, just like the bride. They're all holding flowers. In fact, now with the big advent of everything you do that day must be documented and paid for, played for later, you to watch, every bridesmaid is being treated throughout the day like who? The bride. People show up, they look at their clothes, they take pictures of them, the whole preparation, all of that is true. They have flowers. All of them have flowers, which I supported when my wife was a florist. I think that's biblical, right? But you know what they're not? You're not the bride. And you guys need to understand this. This is a huge deal. It would be insane for them to think they are the bride simply because they are standing somewhere close to the bride. And I need to say this because the church, I believe, if you understand what Jesus says later, about many will say on that day, Lord, Lord, I did miracles in your name, and he says, depart from me, I never knew you. I think we need to understand that the church is tragically filled with people who have made that very mistake. You see, Jesus called the church, capital T, capital C, his bride, and he said he's the bridegroom, did he not? He said this. He's the groom, the church is the bride. And so people come to church, and they look like the bride. Some of you guys, one of the things you do when you go to a church for the first time is you ask the same question I asked before a funeral or a wedding. Well, what's the dress code, really? You may not ask what the dress code is, but you go, well, how do people dress when they go to LifePoint? As it turns out, pretty shabbily from my viewpoint up here. But that's true, right? You want to know, will I be comfortable? I don't want to stand out. I want to look like the other people there. So you come and we show up. We look like the bride. You hang out with the bride, the people in here. You begin to make friendships. You call up the bride. You call up me when you have tragedy. You call up me when you have things to celebrate. You begin to have relationships with the bride. And people make the mistake because they have a relationship with people within the church, a relationship with the church, that they have a relationship with the groom, Jesus. I can make no more important point for you guys to consider on your way out today is this. I want to be very clear. Just because you are in a relationship with me, Don Knight, does not mean that you have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that's not supposed to be said in a way that you feel excluded because the invitation is out there. But I need to say with the wedding again. There's only one person on that wedding day when I stood at my wedding at North Albany Baptist. For you, those of you, again, you say, well, that's great that you guys were such faithful churchgoers. We had to join the church to get the membership rate, so that's what we did. Never set foot in that again. But I wasn't looking at the surroundings. I was only looking at Michelle. I was 23, she was 19. We're young and we were stupid. But I knew that was the only one in there that was my bride. And I want to tell you that when I say to you guys that Jesus is the groom and his people who have accepted the invitation to be his bride, I'm not being exclusionary. I'm being as inclusive as I could possibly be. That invitation, we believe at LifePoint, I believe in my heart, it is open to any one of you. That you could leave today going, I want to be a part of that. So it's not, but I will say this, another smart guy, much smarter than me, he did say that every time you go to embrace one person, and I said this last week, you have to exclude someone else. That philosophically, just the hugging of somebody to say, you are my wife, you are my child, you are my girlfriend, you are my boyfriend, just this act of hugging is exclusionary in its nature also. And there will come a day when the groom gathers his bride. So I'll be very clear again, because I am in a relationship with, I think, every one of you guys. And you know I love you, and you know that even if I'm an idiot, that I have great affection for you. But I need to be very, very clear that none of that is going to mean much on the day the groom returns for his bride. And again, you guys may say that you don't like that, and I'm okay with that. I think far too many churches, I think even unbelievers, are sick and tired of pastors massaging their message just to get butts in the seats. I think even unbelievers see the hypocrisy, and especially, especially unbelievers get sick of it. Spencer and I, and this is not on my notes, Spencer and I listen to comics all the time, podcasts, comics. I love it. And one guy was doing this really good bit. He was this comedian, but I think he was just talking because he wasn't even, it wasn't like a riff. He was just talking about churches and about pastors. And he said, he just said some things about pastors who live with private jets and huge homes. And he wasn't necessarily, I'll send you the link. I'm going to make sure I clean up his language, right? I'll put the link out there maybe, and you guys can judge me harshly, because heaven forbid a pastor use whatever. You guys get where I'm going. But his point was, if you read your Bible at all, if you have even a passing knowledge of what Christ claimed to give to people, it wasn't about cash. And it certainly wasn't about taking your tithe and making sure I live better than the flock. It was about coming together and blessing the community through the church. You guys get that, right? And I'm so far off, I'll just end with this part, and then I'll finish the message. I get asked all the time in here, and this shows how bad we've been indoctrinated to it. When people say, what is the church doing in the community? And I say, you're the church. What are you doing? Tell me what you're doing in here, and we will throw our full support behind it. You set the level of our involvement, not me. You want to go and you want to be involved in this thing? Tell me, and we'll work it out, and we'll pray over it. And if it needs cash, we'll put cash into it. That's the one thing I'm really good about doing is... Thanks, Dave. That's why we rent. One thing I'm good at is giving away all our money. But I can say this about this idea that you guys don't like, some of you, about judgment. That there will come a day when he returns and you're not in a relationship with him, that you will be excluded from the benefits. Do you realize, and I've said this so many times, it should be part of what we do here. We should be able to have this within our shared pool of knowledge and pull it out at a moment's notice. You do realize that only those within a relationship receive the benefits of that relationship. We all get that. I mean, I love you guys, and I love you guys. The group over here I keep talking about, it's because I like them more than I like some of you guys, because I've spent more time with them. And they know I love them. But I'll say this. Which one of them can I say this to? I think I've known Jacob, actually, the longest here. Hey, Landtrout, I love you, don't I? But you're not Caden. You're not my kid. You guys get that? Love him. James, you're like, you didn't know it when I first met you, right? Because I yelled at you every minute. That was on you. I love you, don't I? But you're not Spencer. You're just not. Kayleen, you know I love you. You're not Josie, though. You guys get that, right? And it would be foolish for you guys to not understand that to get the true benefits of my children, you must be in that relationship with me. That when I say to some of you guys, I love you, but you're not Michelle. That would be asinine for you to think, well, I don't like that. That would be foolish. I need to be treated like your wife. You sicko? No. And my wife would be like, careful what you ask for. But I say it again, philosophically, is it not interesting that the rules that we apply to every relationship in our life, when we start to apply them to God, we say they don't count? We say that's not the way it is, and yet every relationship we've been given has been defined by God. Your spouse, your children, they receive the benefits of being your spouse, your children. And only Christ's bride, those in relationship with Him, will receive the benefits of that relationship on Judgment Day. And I've given you two things that you're going to be judged on. And they're not, if you think about it, they're not some wacky, angry, vengeful God. It's one, He has said, you're going to be judged on what you've done with your calling. Have you done your calling that only you could do? Have you faithfully navigated it with what He's been given to you? And then the second would, and you all have the same knowledge. Everybody in here has the same opportunity. What have you chose with your opportunity? There will come a day that instead of us as a church saying to Him, your will be done, your will be done, that one day, one final day, Jesus will say to people who've said, I don't want a relationship with you. And He'll say, well, your will be done then. Okay. That's how it works. You don't want a part of a relationship, then opt out. Well, I know that some of you still don't like it, so let me reach it even further. Let's play it out. I've told you guys with your isms what you believe about stuff. Don't just let it sit in front of you. Play it out, and this is a philosophy class. Don't just say, oh, tomorrow this belief system looks this way. Tomorrow it looks that way. The next year, play it out to its most inevitable conclusion, and that will give you whether or not a belief system has efficacy, the ability to give you what you want. I'm going to give you a couple things here. If you don't like me saying that someone who rejects the value of a relationship, rejects the benefits of a relationship. If you're a mom or a dad in here, next time your teenage daughter has a boyfriend that cheats on her physically, that is out running around, that's out treating her poorly, out slandering her, you need to tell her, oh honey, you can't change the relationship. Even though he's opted out, you still need to act like everything is great. Tell her that. You wouldn't do it. But when someone rejects the value, you need to tell then when your son is injured emotionally because the people he's hanging out with are absolute jerks, and every time he leaves, they say things about his character and about his name, and then they begin to mock him to his face. If you think that what I'm saying is not true about relationships, that to reject the value of a relationship is to reject the benefits, then the next time your son comes home and he's in tears because the way his friends are treating him, you must tell him. If you don't believe this, you must play it out and say to your kid, no, you have to hang out with them all the time. No, you won't do it. And I'm simply going to say this about what we're into, and then we're going to move to next week. I'm asking you guys to do two things as we talk about judgment, which is a big deal. Could you please, one, throw away the caricatures you've dismissed? Throw away the caricatures. I don't believe them either. I have no problem if you say you don't believe in a God whose number one defining nature is wrath and anger and vengeance. I don't either. That's not in there. When it comes to judgment, if you say, man, I don't believe that God's going to come back and he just willy-nilly dismisses people and condemns them, and some go down into a fiery pit where they'll be tortured for all eternity, and others go to play a harp on a cloud. I'm like, good, I'm glad you don't believe that. Neither do I. But secondly, I want you to ask yourself, are you giving God the same benefits you give yourself when you think about this stuff? Are you at least giving Him the same benefit you give yourself, which is this? If someone opts out of a relationship, and I tried to tell this to my daughter, because those of you who have daughters realize they're much more relationally oriented when they're teenagers, when they're young teenagers, aren't they? How many of you remember when your kids were 12, 13, 14, you had daughters and they were hurt by other girls all the time? Remember that? If you didn't raise your hand as a girl, then you were the one out there being mean. Yeah. And some of you know that. Some of you are like, I was that person. But I used to tell my daughter, this was the thing, if somebody tells me they don't want to hang out with me, I trust them. It's a very mature thing, right? If someone says they don't like me, that they don't see value in me, I've come to the point in my life at 57 and 2 weeks That was a horrible sound. Oh, stop. I point to Randy. I talk to Gary when they're out there, John, because I trust them. They know my heart. That's why. It's not because I think they're smarter. In fact, just the opposite. This is through the stupidest guys I know. Randy, isn't that something you wanted Red to pick up early? If someone treats her like trash, didn't you want her to go, I believe you, that you don't want to be with me. I don't want to hang out with you. I don't want to be around you. You're like, great. There will come a day, according to Jesus, who rose from the dead, and we're going to talk about that in Easter, and I really give a lot of credence to a guy who comes back from the dead. He said there's going to come a day when he's going to say to people, okay, you know what? I did everything I could. I gave you relationships that you get joy from, and I said, go follow what I gave you, and the joy are going to come out of you. I gave you the knowledge of me, and I didn't hide it, and everybody said this invitation. You heard it today. There's this invitation. It's a great way to live. Stop expecting it in terms of a limitation. I want to do this, I want to do that, and go like this. There's freedom with living with the best life. I've given you all this stuff, and there's going to come a day, those people who go, I don't want any part of it, I'm going to say to them, he says, then don't. That's all I'm saying. You guys understand? We're going to talk next week about the next two things that Jesus has to say, and then we're going to go into Easter. And the Easter message is going to say he's the only one who can tell us what judgment is going to be and who's going to do it, because the mention of Easter is the mention of the qualification to judge. And that's where we're going to be. I told you guys I'd let you out and not go further, so here we go. I'm going to pray. Come back next week. Please do. All right? I'll give $150 under one chair next week. One chair, Land Troop. You don't know what it's going to be. There'll be an envelope under one chair next week, $150. Dave, bring $150 next week. Heavenly Father, thank you so much that you love us, you love us, you love us, you love us. Thank you for that. If anybody hears anything other than love in this life and whatever comes next, whatever you did on the cross, all of it is love, 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 wanting the best for us, the greatest things for us. If the things we have right now in our life that we love to participate in, or they've been given to us by you and the reflections of even a greater thing we could be a part of, I would ask they feel that. If anybody in my position has ever delivered to them perverted caricatures of who you are and what you want for us, I ask for forgiveness on behalf of all of us who've been called to shepherd. But I would also ask that you would eliminate those thoughts and feelings with anybody in here, and they'd be open to the possibility, man, that this thing is real, and that the other side is just going to be an extension of the beautiful relationships and the wonderful love you've presented already. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.